Wake up, Toronto. It's December 31st, the last day of 2022, New Year's Eve. It's such a special holiday for the world, and some countries, because they're in different time zones, ring it in earlier than us. But it's double the festivities in my household because it's a special lady's birthday. Shout out to my mom. Happy birthday. We all love you. You're the type of person who thinks of others and what you can do to bring a smile on their face. So tonight, we celebrate you. I'm pretty amped because usually it's me throwing the get-together with the whole 9 yards, but this time my brother is hosting. So I just get to show up, sit down, eat all the good food, and relax. So it's going to be a nice change and super fun. What a year it's been. One that I won't forget. And I've always been the same person publicly and privately. So to my followers and those that know me on a personal level, it's like what you see is what you get. But this year, there were some moments I've withheld sharing because I was still processing it. I wasn't on the path or road to healing, and so this year is transitioning anew in a few hours, and this is one story I wanted to leave in the past, but I do want to share some of the lessons which I've learned, and perhaps it could be insightful and helpful to you. Before I get into the storytelling, I wanted to raise this key point. You don't know what anybody is going through unless they tell you, point blank. A lot of people suffer in silence, and you can claim that you see it or feel it, but you really truly don't experience it unless you are them. That can take a huge toll and deteriorate their mental health if they don't get the help that is needed for them to move forward. And a lot of the times they turn to self-harm and we lose them forever. So check up on your loved ones. And it's not always about giving advice. You don't have to say a thing. Sometimes all it takes is just being there, hearing them out, and that could make all the difference. Having said that, today's segment has absolutely no breaking news, internationally or locally. It's more fixated on something that I do best, and telling stories, naturally. And this one is focused on me and what I've been through this year, how I've overcome it to some extent, and I've broken it up into chapters so it's easier to follow. Let's do this. Chapter 1, a whirlwind of change. Post-pandemic and living in Toronto, the lifestyle most of us led previously had drastically changed, with inflation targeting groceries, bills, fuel, and the housing market. Those who never thought of living paycheck to paycheck were now facing that worrisome reality, myself included. With our recent move further east, away from the core part of our city, I had the difficult decision to leave my position at a firm as a journalist filing immigration-related news. It was a 2-hour commute one way for me that wouldn't be worth the while. I mean, the last thing anybody really wants is to be stuck in rush hour, in that traffic. No absolution. It's unpredictable as to when you'll be reaching home, and I just didn't want to gamble with that. Luckily, it was the beginning of spring, and as a dancer and former choreographer, that meant wedding season was around the corner. I was able to sign on a few clients, which would take care of some of the expenses for the next few months. One morning, my husband and I were conversing over coffee, and he suggested I look into some freelance work for businesses through social media marketing. I did have the technical skills to design campaigns, run ads, write copy, etc., and previously worked in real estate within the digital sphere of content curation. I managed to land a few contracts, but a consistent flow of income was not a guarantee. So I was back to the grueling task of updating my resumes and applying for jobs. Once dance rehearsals were officially wrapped up for the year, my daily routine consisted of waking up at 5 a.m., doing a quick workout at the gym, having my morning coffee while completing freelance work, applying for jobs, of course, and then taking care of household chores, running errands, focusing on my podcast, Wake Up Toronto. And then it was down to learning something new each and every day, and then adding it to my existing portfolio. Believe it or not, by 8:30 p.m., I was tired and ready for bed. Chapter 2. Hey universe, it's me. Looking back to early university days, it felt like the first few weeks of kindergarten. With unfamiliar faces in the classroom, there was an opportunity for new friendships. The thirst for knowledge on a specific discipline was a unanimously shared passion. It was all kinds of excitement molded into one big ball of adventure. Though that vibe did gradually dissipate. As years passed, I began to question if the field was right for me. Truth reporting, feel-good stories, and building an admirable relationship with my community were integral to the journalist I imagined to be. Yet, professors and predecessors of the industry made it clear that a job like that was impossible. The news organizations ran on their own trajectory. Their agenda was on the same kind of fear-inducing information that would have people stay indoors, glued to their television screens, awaiting even more depressing propaganda. It was evident. Viewership and profit-making were important. Pitch stories like these were pushed on air nationwide. I would say there was a lack of agency in the reportage, and I wasn't the only one who had this opinion. Fellow colleagues and people I casually spoke to shared similar views. So these influential conglomerates were missing the mark on issues that were problematic, not only within our country, but across the globe. There were uplifting stories that needed to be told in an attempt to restore inspiration, motivation, and happiness. This could only happen if the talking heads listened more and gave a chance to the voiceless. That's where my show Wake Up Toronto was born. It was a spin-off of a fictitious talk show that you may have heard of called Wake Up San Francisco from the hit 90s family sitcom Full House. I created my own platform and had guests share pieces of their life. Stories of strife, terror, resilience, and the silver linings that followed. I received plenty of well wishes and comments to continue my series, and to this day, baby, I am. After graduation, I kept my part-time retail job while I interviewed at various news outlets, only to hear the same words. You are not what we're looking for. When I asked what key traits were ideal, they would say, someone who's had 5 or more years in a fast-paced newsroom environment. Even the behind-the-scenes staff writers also had to have like a similar timeline working for these big communication companies before even moving up the ladder to become a reporter. In simple terms, I had to have prior experience, but no one was giving me that opportunity, especially to a fresh out of university student. For online submissions, the rejection letter came with the generic message that read, "Thanks for your application. After reviewing, you are not qualified for this position. We've gone with another candidate. All the best in your search." Hurtful to one's goals or dreams? Yes. Devastating to one's ego? Abso-freaking-lutely. If anyone has had more doors closed on her, it's me. I'll admit though, rejection does get harder to accept each time. And truthfully, I felt the imposter syndrome kick in. It was as if the education I received or the accomplishments I achieved were worth nothing, that I had wasted my time, because years of hands-on experience equates to an expert, and that is the formula to success. I hadn't reached there yet. To top it off, I was posting to places like YouTube and Instagram as a journalist written in my byline, yet I hadn't conquered that ambition in the real world, which made me an authentic phony. I suppose an oxymoron at its finest. Flash forward to fall 2022. As I mentioned earlier, moving to a new city, getting married, leaving my old job, and affordability shooting up, and being unemployed. Here I was, a 30-something-year-old who always amplified positivity in all facets of her life, was slowly losing her belief in the magic of hope. Why was it so difficult to land the job that I had longed for and worked hard to receive that credentials? Not many kids pursue the first thing they write on their learning prompt given by their teachers saying, "When I grow up, I want to be blank." But I knew my true calling and stayed consistent. I guess it didn't matter, right? With all this complaining and feeling sorry for myself, I should say, welcome to my pity party. Chapter 3. Your wish is my command. One night after completing a breathing exercise, I happened to look out the window. The moon was full. I closed my eyes and reached out to the universe, asking to bring some light and sense of direction into my life. A few days later, I came across a job posting that sparked my interest. The individual who shared it had a career within the same industry but shifted paths and became an entrepreneur. We both briefly DM'd each other throughout Instagram ever so often, but what stood out to me the most is the type of work she was advocating for. It was a place where building women up and empowering them was the leading mantra. Comfortable with the thought of switching gears from journalism into a similar field, I went ahead with the application. A couple weeks passed and I was contacted for a Zoom interview. Honestly, it was the best news I had heard in a while and confirmed to chat with her further about the position. During the interview, I thought her personality was tell it like it is and straight to the point. I respected that. And I have some girlfriends who are also entrepreneurs, so I understood that space of owning a business, and there were so many different lanes, you had to navigate through constantly, which could get exhausting. So the fact that she mentioned she hadn't had the time to look at my resume because of personal reasons, instead of being irritated, I empathized. After we wrapped up the first round, she requested that I send over some of my articles and that a follow-up interview looked bright in my future. Proud was the word I felt, so I obliged and emailed my portfolio along with some of my references a couple days later. A few weeks went by and we scheduled the second Zoom call. This meeting, I was provided with even more clarity and information about the role, the training that would be happening, and other miscellaneous stuff about softwares. Then began the waiting game. When I least expected it, the email arrived with an offer for the position. It was nearly a month in the making and the result was in my favor. I couldn't think of anything except I just exhaled a sigh of relief. My husband and I were going to be financially okay, and the universe had opened my eyes to a new beginning that I would have not sought out on my own. I took another moment of gratitude and accepted the offer with a reply. Wait, it gets better. So my husband and I had our wedding last year, but because of COVID protocols still in place, we were unable to take our getaway. Although we did discuss taking a trip for our 1-year anniversary and postponing it, but the funds weren't there to have that come into fruition. Except it did, and here's why. His grandparents couldn't attend our wedding last year because of health complications and passport issues, so their gift to us was an all-expense paid vacation. Overwhelmed with joy is a fragment of what I was feeling in that moment. A few days later, I was informed that a contract was in the works and would be sent to me for review and a signature. I responded with sheer enthusiasm because that was the vibe, and I debriefed her on the trip, which was a week before I believe the shadowing period. She was understanding and accommodating and decided to move the start time a few days later once I got back home and settled. I did mention a ballpark of her flight info, but not the core details, as it was an entire day of travel, and things are unpredictable during that time. The worst can happen. I didn't know what was going to go down. Anyway, I get an invitation for a meet and greet through a video call with some of the other staff and my employer to be the day of our trip. The time was during takeoff. I tried to play it off that it was a discrepancy on my end because I didn't clarify exact timings and departures, but I was willing to connect at a later time, except, you guessed it, She's a busy CEO, entrepreneur. She was booked up. It wouldn't work, so we'd have to get a crack at it when I had returned. Now that I felt that the hiccups were kind of dealt with, it seemed like smooth sailing from here. I went ahead and downloaded a few of the software tutorials her company would use for clients. Even though training would be paid for, I'm like the go-getter type. I have this mindset, and I'd rather learn something new even if I was on vacation mode. So I wanted to get myself up to speed with that and ask the necessary questions that could help me in a given scenario. Now, our trip was 3 days away. It was crunch time. I had to make sure everything was prepped and ready to go. I was mostly replying via mobile phone because I was out completing errands. So the contract pops in my inbox, and considering deadlines and meeting them, that's a journalist mentality right there. I quickly read through it. There were some clauses which I didn't agree with, but anyways, I filled it out, sent it back. Shortly after, I received an email that the address section in the contract specifically was incomplete because there was a missing postal code. Now, most standardized forms have a separate section for postal code, but this one didn't. But my address was there. If you would type it in Google, it would have popped up with my postal code information. But I did feel bad, and I didn't think it was much of an issue, but I guess an inconvenience of sorts. I apologized, corrected it, and submitted it through email. But guess what? It was serious because the next message back to me was a reminder of how accuracy is important for the business, and the tone completely changed. Now it's takeoff time. My husband and I had invited my parents along with us, so the more the merrier, right? The night before, I believe we had gone to bed around 11:30 p.m., woke up at 4 a.m., left the house around 8:45, picked up my parents, drove the van to Park and Fly, then took a shuttle bus to the airport, went through the whole baggage checks and customs hoopla, and by the time we hit the lounge, they were boarding. I got one final message from my employer-to-be, and I was unsure of what the Wi-Fi circumstances at the resort was going to be like, if we had to pay for it, if it was a good connection or bad, so I quickly replied. I realized after I sent the message that there was one grammar error. So we arrived 10 p.m. that night to the resort and literally went straight to the hotel, to our rooms, and knocked the F out. Chapter 4. I rescind my invitation. Our first full day on the resort, we decided to begin it on a high note and indulged in a big breakfast, and then went to the water park, which was also located on the resort, but was about a 4-minute drive via golf cart. Now, my mom, dad, and I lay on the lawn chair as well. My husband went splashing away on the slides. He's a kid at heart, and one of his conditions going to this specific resort was it had to have slides. So I made it happen, honey. The resort also included Wi-Fi for our time that we were there, and compared to other resorts, usually you have to pay for it, but this was newly renovated, so the connection was quite nice. I was scrolling through my email when I received dun dun dun, a response to the email I had sent to my employer-to-be right before my flight took off. In short, I was no longer being considered for the position based off of the 3 errors I had made the last few days. 1 was the postal code mishap. 2 was not coordinating the correct time of my departure for the meet and greet call, which was on the same day as my flight. 3, the 1-word error in the last email. Those were red flags, and it would completely make or break the quality of service when working for her. But the last few months, communicating via email with each other with complete accuracy didn't matter. It was just thrown out the window. These 3 points were substantial reasons for me to lose that chance at this position. You know what they say, every action has a reaction. And remember how I sent some of my portfolio links from past articles, I believe after the first round of interviews. It was now that she had decided to go back and review them. So it wasn't looked at beforehand, and found one grammar error, and that was the final straw. She did mention that she'll be reposting the job and thanked me for my time. That was it. My stomach sank into my throat. I got up from the chair and walked over to a different part of the poolside and just looked at my phone, reread the email again and again. My husband spotted me. He had just come down the water slide, and I said nothing to him. I just handed him my phone. His words were, after reading it, "Are you serious? This is stupidity. You were communicating internally with her, not through the business or any of her clients, and you did this during time constraints while you were traveling. There is a lack of empathy here, and it's not your fault." Okay, my husband is logical. Maybe he was taking my side a little bit, but granted, all of this was true. It really didn't matter at this point because the offer was off the table, the invitation was rescinded. Now you're probably wondering, well, what about your parents? They didn't know anything about this job situation. I was planning on surprising them when I kind of eased in. But could you imagine if I did tell them, like after arriving at the resort, that, "Hey, Mom, Dad, I got this new job," and explained all the fun and exciting things about it and how I love it so much, and then tell them, "By the way, the job I was hired for, I got fired even before I started." That would be so embarrassing. Like, this has never happened in the history of all the jobs I've ever had. So anyways, I excused myself and went to a secluded table so I could send a final thoughtful message back. I was contemplating if I should or not, but I'm me. I'm Suzanna. I couldn't leave that message ignored. I needed closure. So as I sat there compiling my message, it clicked to me. Why wasn't my portfolio carefully examined prior to the offer letter? The mistake in one of the articles was there the whole time. It did make me feel rather annoyed that all of this heartbreak could have been avoided if someone did their homework. My resume also wasn't reviewed ahead of time, remember? Where was that quality assurance then? To me, it displayed that it wasn't about teamwork. It was more about filling an empty position, and fast. Talk about being on cloud 9 and then back at the bottom. For a minute, let's place a bit of spotlight on the fact that this was the first day of the trip. There was an additional 6 days left. Through what I thought were petty reasons of letting me go, this person decided it was best to break the news on a celebratory occasion. Malicious intent or not, it was distasteful and wrong. There is more. Hold up, I'm getting there. She had shared the job posting minutes after sending me the email. So after that, I kind of retreated to my room and let my emotions take over. I thought how cruel the universe was to send a blessing and then laughingly take it away. Once I was all cried out, my husband and I made a pact that the next day, which was our 1-year anniversary, would be bliss. We were in a paradise while others were in the cold temperatures, all bundled back up in Toronto. And whoever this employer was, judged me based on small mistakes that happened in a sensitive situation, which truly didn't define who I am or my work ethic or past conversations I've ever had with her. And so the days that followed were the greatest. We didn't even revisit what had happened. Until, that is, I returned and felt like I had to break the news to my references, who were very much over the moon about me landing this job in the first place. I thought it was kind of like a courteous move to let them know that I was thankful for the time they took from their schedules and invested in talking with the employer. I was also feeling guilty that my mistake had caused this setback. I was transparent with them, and both references said the same thing to me. You dodged a huge bullet. Deep down, I felt the same way, but their words definitely were validation. It allowed me to take the blame off of myself. The anxiety also lessened, and I was ready to start over. Have you ever heard the saying, what goes around comes around? Because there was a recent Instagram post that she had done where there were plenty of grammar errors, and that was pointed out to me by one of my references. They were calling it hypocrisy at its core. However, to me, it was karma on a greater scale. My grammar error happened between just myself and her, but hers were on display for her thousands of followers. Where was the accuracy and credibility now? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was the tea. This was a huge learning curve for me for 2022, and I've got some tips for you. Are you ready? Number 1, if an employer compares you to their star employee who has worked there longer than you have, it means that they have a certain standard in place, that the employee has made the necessary mistakes to have been able to reach that level. Kind of like a video game, if you will. The statistics are rare to pass the entire game in one play. You will make mistakes and lose before making it to the end. That's evident. In the same sense, if there is no room to learn and grow, then can you truly thrive in that environment? Number 2, perfection is an ideology that sounds great but lacks accuracy. We can acknowledge ourselves as hard workers, as people who are absorbed in our passions. We can strive for the highest perfection. But to communicate that 24/7, well, you'll be setting yourself up for disappointment. Because believe it or not, even technology fails to compute and gives errors. A little food for thought. Number 3, growth doesn't precede growth. Similar to the last point, but if you are constantly competing against yourself or someone else, one day you'll just outgrow whatever it is you are doing. There's no more thrill, and you'll just be bored. You'll want to quit and move on. Number 4, I was hesitant in sharing my truth. Perhaps the fear of standing up for myself and what people would think. But remember, in anything that you do, there will always be people with you and against you. There's always that division of opinion. So thrive on that good energy of your supporters and leave the haters in the back. The further the sound is away from you, the less you can hear their negative voices. Number 5, ask your employer questions, whether that be work from your portfolio or projects that you have completed. Follow up. See what they think. See if they make your concerns theirs. That's how you will know if your presence is valued. Number 6, clarify before you sign. Honey, it's all in the details. Sometimes when you are adamant on a job, you may overlook things and not read the fine print. Ask your employer to give you some time to review the contract before you submit it. Number 7, super important, folks. This was a huge wake-up call for me in 2022, and that's know your worth. If you have experience in something where you are confident, flaunt it. Talk about it, show your skill set, ask for that raise, and prove to others that you can take on something even more challenging. Number 8, no job is worth the hassle if your mental health is depleting. It's one thing working under pressure, but it's another if your employer plays games of manipulation to break you down or threatens to fire you. Get out of there as soon as possible. Number 9, let your authentic self shine. The right people will see right through you. They will understand your potential, respect your ideas. There will be a relationship to build on that is full of honesty and integrity. Plus, you'll be a team player, not just someone who shows up for their 9 to 5 and then leaves. Number 10, stay optimistic. Sometimes things that we may think are good for us turn out to be the opposite. It's here where we need to ground ourselves and release whatever is causing us pain or is an obstacle in the way. It does take courage, though. Now, everyone has a purpose to fulfill in this lifetime. Just be patient, and when all of it aligns at the right moment, you'll know that wait was worth it. Chapter 5, Farewells and Final Thoughts. Well, guys, I'm back at square one. I'm ready to go. In the final hours of 2022, I leave you with this. Life is like a revision of your story. You add sentences, you go back and remove details, changing the layout, even doodling in the corners, or switching perspectives. But guess what? The narrator never changes. It's always you. Understanding that there's no such thing as a perfect life in business, love, spirituality, or friendships. Mistakes are inevitable, but that leads to growth. If we allow ourselves to believe that there is beauty in failure as much as triumph, then can we only see better days ahead? Standing in front of the mirror today, staring at my reflection, I begin to see that 10-year-old girl whose dream of becoming a journalist emerges again. Realizing that the hope wasn't actually lost. It still exists. And I had to let that warmth in. I needed to tell that young, curious self that she is loved now and forever. She will succeed in her endeavors, and she will bring change into the world in her own unique way. That's a wrap. Stay safe tonight, drink responsibly, and if you are, do not drive. Life is too short to take a risk like that. Sending you all so much positive light, love, prosperity, happiness for the new year. And we'll see you in 2023 for a new season. Much love from me to you always. Mwah. Cheers.